Just a housewife, my husband Oliver laughed, his arm draped casually around my shoulders at the company's anniversary gala. Leanne here couldn't tell a balance sheet from a bedsheet. His executive colleagues chuckled on cue while I stood there in my carefully selected black dress, the weight of my MBA diploma and 15 years of silent preparation suddenly invisible. The room froze when my uncle Reggie, the retiring CEO of Meridian Technologies, tapped his glass. I'd like to introduce the new chief executive officer who will be taking the reins next month. Oliver straightened his tie, a practiced smile spreading across his face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Leanne Matthews, Uncle Reggie announced, his eyes finding mine across the room, who has been preparing for this role since she was 19. I raised my champagne flute toward my husband's shocked face. Funny thing about balance sheets, Oliver. They always reveal who really holds the power. The tension in the grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel was palpable as I took slow, deliberate steps toward the stage. My Louboutins clicked against the marble floor, each step marking the transition from the woman they thought they knew to the leader I had always been. The faces in the crowd shifted from confusion to shock to calculation as the implications settled in. Oliver remained frozen in place, champagne glass suspended midway to his lips, his expression cycling through disbelief, embarrassment, and dawning horror. This moment had been 18 years in the making, though neither Oliver nor anyone else at Meridian Technologies knew that. No one except Uncle Reggie and the board of directors who had unanimously approved my appointment last month after years of careful preparation. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 6 years, I'd stood by Oliver's side at company functions, played the perfect corporate wife, listened to his complaints about management decisions, and offered insights he'd casually pass off as his own the next day, all while I was being groomed to take over the very company he was so desperate to climb the ranks of. Uncle Reggie stepped aside from the podium, his eyes twinkling with the satisfaction of a long-laid plan coming to fruition. We had kept my training entirely off the books, weekend strategy sessions disguised as family visits, late-night calls about company direction presented to Oliver as catching up with Uncle Reggie, executive coaching with industry leaders conducted under the guise of charity committee work. "Thank you, Reggie," I said, my voice steadier than I expected as I took my place at the podium. The microphone caught my words, amplifying them across the ballroom where 300 employees, board members, and industry partners watched in stunned silence. As many of you know, Meridian Technologies has been in my family for 3 generations. What you may not know is that I've been preparing to lead this company since before I met my husband. My eyes found Oliver in the crowd. He had managed to set down his champagne glass and was now tugging at his collar, his face flushed crimson under the crystal chandeliers. "Some of you may be surprised by this announcement," I continued, allowing myself a small smile. "Others, like my husband, might be downright shocked." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the audience. But Meridian's success has always depended on looking beyond the obvious, seeing potential where others see limitations, and planning for the long game. That's exactly the philosophy I'll bring as your new CEO. As I delivered the remainder of my prepared remarks about Meridian's future direction and my vision for growth, I watched Oliver slip away from his colleague group and head for the bar. By the time I concluded my speech to enthusiastic applause, most likely fueled by curiosity and strategic allegiance shifting rather than genuine support, he was on his 3rd scotch. The next hour passed in a blur of congratulations, subtle inquiries about my qualifications, and not-so-subtle questions about whether Oliver would remain with the company. I answered each with the polished diplomacy that Uncle Reggie had coached me on for years. "Oliver has been a valuable member of our financial team," I would say. "I look forward to discussing his future role with him privately." It was nearly midnight when I finally found myself face to face with my husband in the emptying ballroom. The catering staff was clearing dishes around us, and the band had packed up their instruments. Oliver's eyes were slightly unfocused from the scotch, but the anger in them was crystal clear. "When exactly were you planning to tell me?" he demanded, keeping his voice low but unable to mask the fury vibrating through each word. I adjusted my diamond bracelet, a gift from Uncle Reggie when I completed my executive MBA program, while Oliver thought I was taking cooking classes. "I've tried to tell you for years, Oliver. You just never bothered to listen." "That's bullshit, Leanne. This was calculated deception. You and Reggie planned this whole thing behind my back." "Behind your back?" I let out a small laugh that held no humor. "I told you I was meeting with Reggie to discuss the company. I told you I had insights into the industry. I literally left financial projections on our home office desk that you dismissed as my little hobby work. You were playing house, hosting dinner parties, planning our vacations. How was I supposed to know you were—" "That's exactly it, Oliver," I interrupted, my calm finally giving way to the frustration of years of dismissal. "You saw exactly what you wanted to see. Just a housewife. And it never once occurred to you that I could be more, because in your mind, managing a household couldn't possibly translate to managing a company." His jaw clenched as he glanced around, suddenly aware of the lingering staff witnessing our confrontation. "We'll discuss this at home," he muttered. I shook my head, the weight of the day settling into a strange mix of vindication and sadness. "No, we won't. My things are already packed. I'll be staying at the Madison Hotel until I find a new place." I reached into my clutch and removed a business card, placing it on the table between us. "This is my lawyer's contact information. I think it's best if we handle things professionally from here on out." "You're leaving me? Tonight? Because of a job?" His voice cracked on the last word, genuine shock registering on his face perhaps for the first time that evening. "No, Oliver. I'm leaving because 6 years ago when we met, you pursued the director's daughter with calculated precision. You saw me as a stepping stone to the C-suite, never as a partner." I gathered my wrap around my shoulders. "The board meeting is at 9 a.m. on Monday. As CFO, your presence is expected. As my husband, your position is up for consideration." I turned and walked away, the echo of my heels on marble creating the soundtrack to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. This wasn't how I had imagined this night unfolding when Uncle Reggie first proposed his succession plan, years ago. But as I stepped into the cool night air, I realized this confrontation had been inevitable from the moment Oliver had first laughed off my interest in the family business and called me just a housewife. Not just tonight, but every day of our marriage in 100 unspoken ways. The Blacktown car Uncle Reggie had arranged pulled up to the curb. As I slid into the leather seat, I finally allowed myself to feel the magnitude of everything that had happened. CEO of Meridian Technologies, the end of my marriage, a new beginning entirely on my terms. I had spent years pouring coffee at Oliver's, strategy sessions, hosting dinner parties for his networking, standing silently at his side while he built his career on the foundation of my family's company. But starting Monday, Oliver would be the one standing at attention in my boardroom, and I was nobody's, just a housewife anymore. 3 days before the gala that changed everything, I stood in our kitchen arranging hors d'oeuvres for Oliver's small gathering of colleagues that had somehow expanded to include half the finance department. The granite countertop was covered with elegant canapes I'd spent hours preparing, despite having spent the entire morning in confidential meetings with Meridian's largest investors. "Babe, Paolo's asking about that new acquisition, the tech startup in Austin," Oliver called from the living room. "What was it called again?" "Nexus Dynamics," I replied, carefully arranging smoked salmon on blinis. I'd personally overseen the due diligence for that acquisition, though as far as Oliver knew, I'd simply heard him mention it on a call. Right, he said, reappearing in the kitchen doorway, lowering his voice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Listen, we're talking strategy. Can you bring in those appetizers and then maybe make yourself scarce? The guys want to discuss some sensitive company matters. I looked up from my careful arrangement. Sensitive matters about Nexus Dynamics? He nodded, already turning away. Just C-suite stuff. Nothing you'd understand. Oh, and we're running low. On that scotch I like. As I carried in the trays of food, I caught snippets of their conversation. Incorrect projections, misunderstood technology specifications, and a fundamental misreading of Nexus Dynamics' market position. Paolo, Oliver's closest ally at Meridian and fellow VP, was particularly confident in his flawed analysis. The integration costs alone will sink the first year's profits, Paolo declared as I set down the platter in front of him. Reggie's getting soft in his old age, pushing this deal through. I couldn't help myself. Actually, the integration costs are front-loaded in the acquisition price. The technology's already compatible with our Phoenix platform. 5 faces turned to me with expressions ranging from surprise to amusement to irritation. Oliver laughed, the sound brittle and dismissive. Leanne's been eavesdropping on my calls again, he said with a wink to his colleagues. Honey, why don't you bring out those whiskey glasses while the men handle the business talk? I felt the familiar burn of humiliation as I retreated to the kitchen, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Resolve. For years, I'd concealed my involvement with Meridian at Uncle Reggie's request, a strategy to evaluate the company's culture and personnel from the inside without the bias that would come with being identified as the owner's niece and potential successor. That night, after Oliver's colleagues had left and he'd fallen asleep, I called Uncle Reggie from my car, in the garage. It's time, I said simply when he answered. You're sure? He asked, though I could hear the smile in his voice. At 72, he'd been waiting for this moment, for me to finally declare myself ready to step out of the shadows. I just listened to Oliver and his team completely misinterpret the Nexus acquisition, an acquisition I structured, while I served them drinks in my own home. I gripped the steering wheel, though the car wasn't running. I'm done playing the corporate wife. The board meets tomorrow morning. The announcement will be made at the gala. He paused. Oliver doesn't suspect anything? I thought about my husband sleeping upstairs, confident in his position, oblivious to the years of careful preparation happening right under his nose. Oliver sees exactly what he expects to see, I replied, and he's never expected to see a CEO. The next day passed, in a blur of secret preparations. While Oliver went to work, I met with the board of directors to formalize my appointment, signed the final paperwork, and had a private lunch with Uncle Reggie to review the transition plan. By the time I returned home to prepare for the gala, my future was sealed, though Oliver still thought I'd spent the day at a spa and shopping for a dress for his big night. I selected my outfit carefully, a black sheath dress that was elegant without being flashy, paired with the diamond earrings that had been my grandmother's, the original matriarch of Meridian Technologies back when it was just a small electronics repair shop. My grandmother, who had kept the books and managed operations while my grandfather was the public face of the company. History had a way of repeating itself in our family. As I applied my lipstick, Oliver came up behind me, adjusting his cufflinks. You look nice, he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. For a brief moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen for, the ambitious, energetic financial analyst who'd courted me at a charity event 6 years ago, before I realized his interest had more to do with my family connections than my personality. Thank you, I replied, maintaining my composure though my heart was racing with the knowledge of what the evening would bring. Big night tonight, he continued, straightening his tie. Reggie's finally announcing his retirement and naming his successor. Paolo thinks it might be Richardson from operations, but my money's on Stevens. Either way, major reshuffling ahead. He grinned. Good time to be in the CFO's seat. I capped my lipstick. You really have no idea who it might be? Oliver shrugged. Reggie plays things close to the chest, but it'll be someone from inside the company, someone who understands Meridian's culture. He winked at me. Someone like me in a few years, if I keep climbing. Someone who understands Meridian's heart, I corrected softly. What? I stood, smoothing my dress. Nothing. We should go. Wouldn't want to be late for your big night. As we drove to the Westbrook Hotel, Oliver rehearsed what he called his power conversations for the evening, who he needed to impress, what strategic insights he would casually drop, how he would position himself favorably with whoever was named as Reggie's successor. I half listened, nodding at appropriate intervals while mentally reviewing my own preparations for the evening, the speech I had memorized, the keyboard members I needed to connect with, the strategic announcements about Meridian's future direction that I would make as the new CEO. Remember, Oliver said as we pulled up to the valet, these events are important for my career. Just smile, look pretty, and let me handle the business talk. I took a deep breath as he came around to open my door. In less than 2 hours, his entire understanding of our relationship and his place at Meridian Technologies would be irrevocably shattered. Of course, dear, I said, taking his arm. It's your night to shine. 6 years earlier, I stood on the terrace of the Lakeside Country Club, nursing a glass of champagne and watching guests mingle at my uncle's 70th birthday celebration. At 28, I had just completed my MBA from Wharton and was deep into what Uncle Reggie called my stealth training program, learning every aspect of Meridian Technologies from the ground up without revealing my connection to the Matthews family. You need to understand the company without the distortion that comes from being the boss's niece, Uncle Reggie had insisted when I was 19 and first expressed interest in eventually leading the family business. People behave differently when they know you'll one day sign their paychecks. So I'd interned at our competitors during college breaks, earned my MBA with a focus on tech management, and had spent the past 2 years consulting for similar companies in our industry, all while meeting regularly with Uncle Reggie to discuss Meridian's operations, challenges, and strategy. Ms. Matthews? A confident voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find a tall man with warm brown eyes and an impeccable suit extending his hand. Oliver Harrington, I don't believe we've met. Leanne, I replied, shaking his hand. And no, I don't think we have. I'd remember if we had, he said with a smile that managed to be both professional and slightly flirtatious. I'm with Meridian Technologies, senior financial analyst in the corporate development group. I felt a flutter of curiosity. Uncle? Reggie had mentioned bringing on promising new talent in that department. You work for Reggie Matthews, then? The birthday boy? Oliver nodded, glancing toward where my uncle was holding court with a group of longtime friends. He's quite the legend in the industry, started as a repair technician and built Meridian into what it is today. He looked back at me. Are you in the tech sector as well? I hesitated, then gave him the cover story Uncle Reggie and I had agreed upon years ago. I'm in management consulting primarily with tech firms, just taking a break between projects at the moment. Ah, that explains the sharp questions about market consolidation during the dinner toast, Oliver said, his eyes lighting with genuine interest. I was impressed. Most people at these events want to talk about anything but business strategy. I laughed, surprised and pleased that he'd been paying attention. Guilty as charged. I find business strategy fascinating, especially in evolving markets like tech. For the next hour, we talked about everything from emerging competitors to supply chain innovations. Oliver was smart, engaged, and refreshingly straightforward about his ambitions. I want to be CFO within 5 years, he confessed as we walked along the club's moonlit garden path. I know that sounds aggressive, but I believe in setting clear goals. It's not aggressive if you have the skills to back it up, I replied. and the vision to see beyond the numbers to what they mean for the company's future. He stopped walking and turned to face me. That's exactly it. Most people in finance just see spreadsheets. I see stories about where a company has been and where it could go. He smiled ruefully. Sorry, I don't usually talk shop this much on first meetings. I don't mind, I said honestly. It's nice to meet someone passionate about their work. Speaking of which, he said, would you consider having dinner with me next week? I'd love to hear more about your consulting projects. Our courtship was a whirlwind of intellectual connection and shared ambition. Over candlelit dinners, we debated market trends. During weekend hikes, we discussed leadership philosophies. Oliver seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives, often calling me his strategic advantage, his partner who saw things differently than his finance-focused colleagues. When he proposed 6 months later on a weekend trip to Napa Valley, I said yes without hesitation. Here was a man who respected my mind, who saw me as an equal, who might someday understand and support my ultimate goal of leading Meridian Technologies. Uncle Reggie was cautiously supportive when I told him about Oliver. He's sharp, no doubt about it. Fast-tracked for senior leadership, he acknowledged. But are you sure you want to reveal your connection to me? Your training program isn't complete. I considered this carefully. Not yet, I finally decided. Let me see if this relationship has staying power first. And I want him to love me for myself, not for my family connections. So our engagement continued with Oliver believing I was simply the niece of his boss, not the designated heir to the company. We married in a small ceremony at the Matthews family lake house, with Oliver none the wiser that he was standing on property that had belonged to Meridian's founding family for generations. Our first year of marriage was everything I'd hoped for, an equal partnership between two ambitious professionals who respected each other's capabilities. Oliver would bring home challenging financial scenarios from work, and we'd solve them, together over dinner. I'd share insights from my consulting projects, actually my training assignments from Uncle Reggie, and Oliver would incorporate them into his presentations, proudly telling me later how impressed his superiors had been. We make a great team, he'd say, kissing me before heading to bed. Your strategic thinking and my financial expertise, we're unstoppable. When Oliver was promoted to finance director in record time, partly based on an acquisition strategy, we developed together at our kitchen table. He brought home champagne and 2 glasses. To us, he toasted, his eyes shining with genuine appreciation. I couldn't have done this without you, Leanne. Your insights made all the difference. I clinked my glass against his, feeling a surge of hope. Perhaps when the time came to reveal my true role at Meridian, he would understand. Perhaps our partnership was strong enough to withstand the surprise. That night, as Oliver slept beside me, I called Uncle Reggie with an update on my training. I think I've found my CFO, I whispered into the phone, watching my husband's peaceful face. Someone who truly understands the numbers and has the ambition to help drive Meridian forward. Just make sure he understands who's driving, Uncle Reggie cautioned. Power has a way of changing people, Leanne. I've seen promising young men like Oliver transform once they get a taste of the executive suite. Not Oliver, I insisted. He values partnership. He respects my mind. That won't change with a promotion. The silence on the other end of the line should have warned me, but I was too much in love to hear it. I hope you're right, Uncle Reggie finally said. For both your sakes. I couldn't have known then how quickly that hope would unravel, or how prophetic my uncle's warning would prove to be. At that moment, lying beside my husband in the dark, I truly believed we would always be equals. Partners in life, perhaps someday partners in business. I had no way of knowing that less than a year later, I would hear Oliver refer to me as just the wife for the first time. The changes were so gradual, I almost missed them. 18 months into our marriage, Oliver was promoted to Vice President of Finance at Meridian. The night of the announcement, We celebrated at Lombardi's, the upscale Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. To the youngest VP in Meridian's history, I toasted, genuinely proud of his accomplishment. The promotion was well-deserved. Oliver had a talent for financial strategy that even Uncle Reggie acknowledged privately to me. Oliver clinked his glass against mine, his face flushed with success and expensive Cabernet. I can hardly believe it myself. When I started at Meridian, I never imagined climbing the ladder this quickly. I'm not surprised, I said honestly. You've always had the vision and drive. Though I do think that reorganization proposal we worked on last month certainly helped your case. A flicker of something, discomfort, irritation, crossed Oliver's face before his smile returned. About that, he said, setting down his glass. Randy mentioned how impressed he was with the workforce efficiency metrics in that presentation. Randy Stevens was the COO and Oliver's direct superior. I waited for Oliver to continue with what I expected would be an acknowledgement of our teamwork. Instead, he said, I think it's better if we keep our relationship a bit more separate from my work from now on. I felt a small chill despite the restaurant's warm lighting. What do you mean? It's just that he reached across the table to take my hand, his tone gentle but firm. Now that I'm in the executive suite, perception matters more than ever. If people think I'm bringing home company materials or that my strategies aren't entirely my own. But we've always collaborated, I said carefully. Since our first date, practically. And that was perfect when I was still establishing myself, he agreed. But now, it's different. I need to be seen as my own man, making my own decisions. I see, I said, though I didn't. Not fully. Not yet. It doesn't change anything between us, Oliver insisted, squeezing my hand. You're still my brilliant wife. And actually, this could be good for you too. Give you more time to focus on those charity committees you've been interested in. He was referring to the Women's Leadership Foundation I'd joined, which was, in reality, another one of Uncle Reggie's training exercises, connecting me with female executives who could mentor me privately. Right, I said, forcing a smile. The charity work? The second shift came 3 months later. I was reviewing quarterly projections for Meridian's new consumer products division, documents Uncle Reggie had shared with me as part of my ongoing education, when Oliver arrived home unexpectedly. Early! What are you doing? He asked, his voice sharp as he spotted the spreadsheet spread across our home office desk. I looked up, momentarily confused by his tone. Just looking over some numbers. He crossed the room quickly, gathering the papers. These are confidential company documents, Leanne. Where did you get these? For a split second, I considered telling him the truth, that his boss, my uncle, had provided them as part of my long-term training to eventually lead the company. But something in Oliver's expression stopped me. This wasn't my thoughtful partner asking a question. This was an executive protecting territory. You left them in your briefcase, I improvised. I was just curious. His posture relaxed slightly, but his frown remained. You shouldn't be going through my work materials. This isn't like your consulting projects. These are sensitive Meridian financials. I wasn't going to share them with anyone, I said, letting a hint of hurt creep into my voice. I was just interested in what you're working on. Oliver's expression softened. He set down the papers and leaned against the desk. I know you miss the intellectual challenge of your consulting work, but my job has to stay at the office. He smiled in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. Besides, you're so busy with the house and your committees now. Isn't Elsie's fundraiser this weekend? Elsie Phillips was the foundation chair, and also a retired tech CEO who'd been giving me private lessons in crisis management as a favor to Uncle Reggie. It is, I acknowledged. And you're right, I should focus on that. After that incident, Oliver became more careful about what company information he brought home, and our evening discussions about business strategy gradually transformed into him delivering monologues about his accomplishments while I listened attentively. The partnership of minds I'd valued had begun its subtle shift into something less equal, less collaborative. The third change occurred at the annual Meridian holiday party. For the previous 2 years, Oliver had proudly introduced me to colleagues as my wife Leanne, the strategy consultant who keeps me on my toes. This year, as we circulated among executives and their spouses, his introduction simplified to my wife Leanne. When Randy Stevens asked about my work, Oliver answered before I could speak. Leanne's taking some time off from consulting. She's running our household now, which is more than a full-time job with all our entertaining. I felt myself being redefined in real time, my professional identity casually erased in a crowded room. Later that evening, as we mingled with a group of newer employees who didn't know me, someone asked directly what I did. She makes sure I don't miss any appointments and keeps our social calendar running like clockwork, Oliver answered with an affectionate squeeze of my shoulder. I'd be lost without my personal assistant at home. The group laughed appreciatively, while I stood there with a frozen smile, recognizing the dangerous territory we were entering. On the drive home, I tried to address it gently. You know, when people ask what I do, I'm capable of answering for myself, I said, keeping my tone light. Oliver glanced over, seemingly surprised. Was I speaking over you? Sorry about that. Just trying to keep things simple. By describing me as your personal assistant? He laughed. It was a joke, Leanne. Everyone knows how much I value you, do they? Because it seemed like you were deliberately downplaying my professional background. Oliver's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I thought we agreed your consulting work was in the past. We're in a different phase now. I'm building my career. And you're supporting that by handling our home life. There's nothing wrong with that traditional arrangement. There is if it's not what we agreed to, I said quietly. Well, things change, don't they? He replied, an edge entering his voice. My position at Meridian requires certain appearances, certain dynamics. The other executives' wives understand that. I'm not the other executives' wives, I said. Oliver sighed as he pulled into our driveway. No, you're mine, and I need a partner who understands what that means as I climb higher at Meridian. He turned off the engine and looked at me. Can you be that partner, Leanne? In that moment, I should have recognized the question for what it really was. Not whether I could support him, but whether I would accept my diminishment as the price of his advancement. Instead, remembering Uncle Reggie's advice about learning the company from all angles, I nodded. Of course I can, I said. I want you to succeed. It was true, though not for the reasons he believed. I wanted Oliver to succeed, because I still hoped that when the time came for me to take my place at Meridian, he would stand beside me as I had stood beside him, as a true partner. Looking back now, I realized that was the moment I should have seen what was coming. The moment his ambition revealed itself as something that required my diminishment rather than our mutual elevation. Instead, I helped him select a new tie for his executive headshot the next day, pushing away the nagging realization that my husband was slowly writing me out of my own story. By our 3rd anniversary, the transformation was complete. The man who had once eagerly sought my strategic input now patronizingly explained basic business concepts to me over dinner. The partnership that had begun with intellectual equality had morphed into a dynamic where Oliver was the important executive, and I was, increasingly, just the supportive wife who ensured his shirts were pressed and dinner parties were flawless. Yupati, wouldn't believe the acquisition deal we're working on, Oliver announced one evening as I served the roast chicken I'd prepared, despite having spent the morning in a confidential meeting with Uncle Reggie about that very acquisition. Finally getting into the AI space? Very cutting edge. That sounds interesting, I replied neutrally. What's the target company's market position? Oliver chuckled, cutting into his chicken. It's complicated stuff, honey. Lots of technical valuation metrics you wouldn't understand. Try me, I said, setting down my fork. He sighed, the sound tinged with affectionate condescension. Look, I know you like to keep your hand in with those business books you read, but this is high-level corporate strategy. Even some of the board members are struggling to grasp the implications. The board members whose questions I had prepared answers for just that morning, working alongside Uncle Reggie. Of course, I murmured, swallowing both my response and my pride. How's the chicken? Our social life underwent a similar transformation. When we'd first married, we'd hosted dinner parties together, both of us engaging guests in discussions ranging from industry trends to politics. Now Oliver would hold court in the living room with the men, discussing serious matters, while I was expected to discuss recipes and vacation spots with the wives in the kitchen. When Lorna Murray, a newly appointed director of innovation at Meridian, attempted to join the men's conversation at one such gathering, Oliver skillfully redirected her. Lorna, I think you and Leanne would have a lot in common, he said smoothly. She's been looking into that charity you mentioned. What was it called, honey? The women's leadership thing? Lorna shot me a look of barely concealed irritation at being shuffled away from the business talk, but followed me to the kitchen nonetheless. Once we were alone, she surprised me by saying, You're Reggie Matthews' niece, aren't you? I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. I'm sorry? It's okay, she said quietly. Reggie mentioned he had a niece who was married to someone at Meridian. When I saw you at the company picnic with Oliver, I put it together. He also mentioned you're being groomed for something significant. For the first time in years, I encountered someone who saw beyond the executive wife facade. Please don't mention that to anyone, I said softly. Especially not to Oliver. Lorna raised an eyebrow. He doesn't know? I shook my head. It's complicated. Clearly, she replied, glancing toward the living room where Oliver's confident voice dominated the conversation. But just so you know, what he's telling them about the Eastern market expansion is completely wrong. The regulatory hurdles alone will delay implementation by at least 18 months, I finished. I know. A slow smile spread across Lorna's face. Well, this just got interesting. Tell me, does he have any idea who he's really married to? Less and less every day, I admitted. From that night forward, Lorna became my ally and confidant at Meridian. Through her, I gained additional insights into the company's day-to-day operations that even Uncle Reggie wasn't privy to. She also confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Oliver was building a reputation as a ruthless climber, taking credit for others' work and strategically undermining colleagues he viewed as threats. He's formed quite the boys' club with Paolo and a few others, Lorna told me during one of our charity planning lunches that were actually strategy sessions. They're systematically pushing out anyone who doesn't fit their vision of Meridian's future leadership, especially women and older employees who remember the company's history. People who might be loyal to the Matthews family tradition, I observed. Exactly. Your husband is ambitious, Leanne. He wants the CEO position when Reggie retires, and he's positioning himself aggressively. The irony wasn't lost on me. Oliver was maneuvering for a position that had been designed for me since I was 19, all while treating me as nothing more than a decorative accessory to his rise. At home, the dynamic continued to deteriorate. Our home office, once a shared space, gradually became Oliver's study. My business books were relocated to the guest room bookshelf to make space for his golf trophies and industry awards. When I attempted to discuss an article about market trends relevant to Meridian, Oliver would listen with half-hearted interest before changing the subject. That's nice, honey. But did you call the landscaper about the backyard? The Jacobsons are coming for barbecue this weekend, and I want everything. Perfect. Randy just approved their department's budget, and I need to make a good impression. The Leanne who had excited him with her business acumen on their first date had vanished from his perception, replaced by a household manager whose value was measured in perfectly pressed shirts and well-executed dinner parties. The culmination of this transformation occurred at the Meridian Executive Retreat. Historically, spouses had not been included, but this year, as the company celebrated record profits, partners were invited for the final evening's gala dinner. As we entered the ballroom of the mountain resort, Oliver was immediately waved over by Randy and several board members. "Bring your lovely wife," Randy called. "We've heard so much about her." Oliver guided me toward the group, his hand possessively at the small of my back. "Gentlemen, this is Leanne," he said proudly, as though introducing a prized acquisition. "Leanne," Randy said warmly. "Oliver tells me you've been instrumental to his success at Meridian." I waited for Oliver to mention my business background, my strategic thinking, any of the qualities he had once valued beyond my domestic capabilities. "Absolutely," Oliver said, beaming. "She runs our home like a CEO, manages the staff, handles our social calendar, keeps everything running smoothly so I can focus entirely on Meridian. I don't have to worry about a thing outside the office." The men nodded approvingly, several glancing at their own wives with similar appreciation for services rendered. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, but a cool, clear certainty that I had been playing a role for far too long. "You're too modest," I heard myself saying to Oliver, my voice light but firm. I also proofread all his presentations. "You wouldn't believe the financial modeling errors I've caught." A flicker of alarm crossed Oliver's face. "Leanne loves a good spreadsheet," he said quickly, with a laugh that held a warning. "Always trying to understand my work." "More than trying," I continued pleasantly. "Last month's projection model for the Asia expansion was particularly interesting, though I would have factored in the regulatory changes in Singapore more aggressively." The board members looked at me with sudden interest. Randy Stevens tilted his head. "You have a background in financial modeling, Mrs. Harrington?" Before I could answer, Oliver interjected. "Leanne took some business courses before we met. She likes to keep up with the jargon." He turned to me, his smile fixed. "Darling, I think Susan was looking for you by the champagne fountain." Susan Reynolds was the CEO's executive assistant and, more importantly, a notorious gossip. "Of course," I said, recognizing the dismissal for what it was. "Gentlemen, it was lovely meeting you." As I walked away, I heard Oliver smoothly transitioning to quarterly projections, erasing my momentary disruption of his carefully constructed narrative. That night in our hotel room, the confrontation was inevitable. What was that about? Oliver demanded as soon as the door closed behind us. "You embarrassed me in front of the board." "By demonstrating basic knowledge of your company's operations?" I asked, unzipping my dress with deliberate calm. "By pretending to understand complex financial models you've glimpsed over my shoulder," he countered. "These men take me seriously, Leanne. I can't have you playing business expert with them." I turned to face him. "What if I'm not playing?" His laugh was dismissive. "Come on, you haven't worked in years. You're a housewife, and a wonderful one. Why isn't that enough for you?" In that moment, standing in an overpriced resort room paid for by the company my family had built, I realized that Oliver wasn't just diminishing me anymore. He had actively erased the woman he'd fallen in love with, replacing her with a creation of his own design, one that better served his ambitions. "You're right," I said quietly. "Why isn't it enough?" He mistook my question for capitulation, his expression softening as he crossed the room to kiss my forehead. "You're perfect exactly as you are," he assured me. My perfect wife. But as he turned away to loosen his tie, he missed the resolve, forming in my eyes. I was indeed perfect exactly as I was, not as his creation, but as Reggie Matthews' heir, the woman who had been preparing for years to lead Meridian Technologies into its next chapter. And it was finally time for Oliver to meet her. The annual Matthews family reunion at Lake Geneva had been a tradition since before Meridian Technologies existed. Every summer, 3 generations gathered at the sprawling lakeside compound to reconnect, reminisce, and, though few outside the family knew this, discuss the future of the company that had made them wealthy. This year marked the 50th anniversary of Meridian's founding by my grandparents, Edward and Susan Matthews. Oliver had always attended these reunions with me, though he viewed them primarily as networking opportunities with my influential uncle rather than family gatherings. "We should only stay 2 nights this time," Oliver said as I packed our bags. "I have that strategy meeting with Paolo and Randy on Monday morning." "It's the 50th anniversary," I reminded him. "Uncle Reggie is giving a special presentation on Sunday about Grandma and Grandpa's legacy. We can't miss that." Oliver sighed, but relented. "Fine, but make sure Reggie knows I made a special effort to stay. It could help with that SVP position that's opening up." The reunion was larger than usual, with distant cousins and former executives who had been part of Meridian's early days joining the celebration. Oliver was in his element, working the crowd with practiced charm, always positioning himself near Uncle Reggie when important conversations were happening. Saturday afternoon found me sitting on the dock with my great-aunt Elsie, my grandmother's younger sister who had worked as Meridian's operations manager in its first 2 decades. At 92, her mind remained razor-sharp, her observations unclouded by sentimentality. "Your husband is certainly attentive to Reggie," she remarked, watching Oliver laughing at something my uncle had said across the lawn. "Reminds me of those remoras that attach themselves to sharks." I couldn't help but smile at her candor. "He's ambitious." "So was your grandmother," Aunt Elsie replied, turning her piercing blue eyes on me. "But she never confused ambition with value." She patted my hand. "Reggie tells me you're nearly ready to take the reins." "I think so," I said quietly. "But Oliver doesn't know yet." Aunt Elsie's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've kept your own husband in the dark about who you really are? That's a heavy secret to carry, my dear." "It wasn't supposed to be for this long," I admitted. "In the beginning, I wanted him to love me for myself, not for my connection to Meridian. Then, as he climbed the ranks, it became complicated. Because he began to see you differently," she said. Not a question, but an observation. "Yes." She nodded slowly, her gaze drifting across the lake. "Your grandfather did the same to your grandmother, you know. This was news to me." "What do you mean?" "Susan was brilliant with operations and finance. She could look at a balance sheet and spot inefficiencies no one else saw. She built the systems that allowed Meridian to grow beyond a small repair shop. But as the company expanded, Edward began introducing her as my wife, rather than my business partner. In public, she became the woman who organized company picnics, not the woman who designed our inventory control system." The parallel to my own situation sent a chill through me despite the warm sunshine. "What did she do?" "She allowed it," Aunt Elsie said simply. "For years, she stood in his shadow, letting him take the spotlight while she worked behind the scenes. She thought it was necessary for the company's success. Investors in those days were skeptical of women in leadership. She turned to face me fully. And do you know what happened when Edward died suddenly of a heart attack in 1987? I shook my head, transfixed. The board tried to sell the company. They didn't believe Susan could lead without him, despite her having essentially run operations for 30 years. She had to fight for her rightful place, a fight that nearly destroyed Meridian and certainly damaged her legacy. "I didn't know," I said softly. "Few do. We don't often speak of that dark period." Aunt Elsie's voice grew firm. "Which is precisely the problem, Leanne. When women allow their contributions to be diminished or obscured, They don't just harm themselves. They become invisible in the story, forgotten by history. Your grandmother's name should be as prominent as your grandfather's on the company masthead, but it isn't, because she accepted her public diminishment for too long. I watched Oliver across the lawn, now deep in conversation with two board members. You think I'm making the same mistake. I think, she said carefully, that there is a difference between strategic patience and self-erasure. One serves a purpose. The other becomes a habit that can consume you. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Don't wait until it's too late to claim your place, as Susan did. The cost is too high. That evening, during Uncle Reggie's presentation about Meridian's founding, I watched with new awareness as he showed old photographs of my grandparents. In nearly every image, my grandfather stood front and center, while my grandmother stood slightly behind, her contributions reduced to a footnote in the official company history. When Oliver leaned over and whispered, "Your grandfather was really something, a true visionary," I felt something crystallize within me. My grandmother was the financial genius, I whispered back. She created the business model that made Meridian profitable. Oliver blinked in surprise, then smiled indulgently. Is that the family legend? Charming. It's not legend, I said, more firmly than I intended. It's documented fact that's been systematically erased. His smile faltered. Okay, whatever you say, honey. He patted my knee and returned his attention to Uncle Reggie's speech. In that moment, watching my husband dismiss my family's true history as casually as he dismissed me, I understood what Aunt Elsie had been trying to tell me. I wasn't just allowing Oliver to diminish me personally. I was participating in the same pattern that had nearly cost my grandmother her rightful place in Meridian's story. As the presentation concluded and the family raised their glasses to toast Meridian's legacy, I made a silent vow. The cycle of erasure would end with me. The Matthews family reunion marked a turning point in my awareness, but outwardly, nothing changed. I continued my double life. Dutiful corporate wife in public, CEO in training in private. The contradiction wore on, me more now that I understood its historical context, but Uncle Reggie counseled patience. Just 6 more months, he assured me during our weekly meeting, disguised as a casual lunch at a cafe far from Meridian's offices. The succession plan is finalized. The board has unanimously approved your appointment, and Oliver still has. No idea? I asked, stirring my untouched tea. Uncle Reggie's expression softened with rare sympathy. Not from our end, though how he's missed the signs all these years is beyond me. The signs were there for anyone paying attention. My regular meetings with charity contacts who were actually industry leaders and board members, the executive leadership courses I'd completed, the book club that was actually a CEO mentoring. Circle. But Oliver saw only what reinforced his narrative. A supportive wife whose ambitions extended no further than maintaining his home and social calendar. This selective blindness became painfully clear at the Chamber of Commerce dinner the following month. Meridian was being honored for its contributions to local STEM education initiatives, programs I had designed with Lorna Murray, though Oliver had presented them to the board as his project. As we arrived at the downtown hotel, Oliver straightened his tie and reviewed his talking points for the acceptance speech. Remember to thank Randy specifically, I suggested. The funding increase was his decision. Oliver nodded absently. Got it. How do I look? Perfect, I assured him, helping him adjust his cufflinks. A gift from me on our first anniversary, back when he still valued my mind as much as my support. We were seated at the head table with other honorees and local business leaders. To my surprise, Dr. Susan Whitmore, the dean of the business school at State University and a member of my book club, was seated beside me. Leanne, she greeted me warmly. What a pleasure to see you here. I was just telling my colleagues about your brilliant analysis of distributor consolidation patterns last week. I felt Oliver stiffen beside me. I think you must be confusing my wife with someone else, he said with a polite laugh. Leanne's expertise is more in the domestic arts than business analysis. Dr. Whitmore looked momentarily confused. But at the leadership forum, that's Susan's charity focus, Oliver interrupted smoothly. Women's leadership. She attends some lectures and discussion groups, but it's more of a social thing than professional. He turned to me with an indulgent smile. Isn't that right, honey? 10 years of training in corporate diplomacy kept my expression pleasant. The discussions are quite substantive, I said carefully. Dr. Whitmore has been a wonderful mentor. Mentor? Oliver chuckled. That's sweet. Leanne's always trying to improve herself. One of the things I love about her. He turned to Dr. Whitmore. But she's never worked in corporate leadership. She's being modest about her real talents. You should see the fundraiser she organized last month. 300 guests, perfect down to the last detail. I watched as my professional identity was erased yet again, replaced with the domestic arts narrative Oliver had created. Dr. Whitmore's eyes met mine with a mixture of confusion and concern, clearly trying to reconcile the confident business strategist she knew from our leadership forums with the decorative wife Oliver was describing. How versatile you are, she said diplomatically. When Oliver excused himself to speak with the mayor before the ceremony, Dr. Whitmore leaned in. Leanne, does your husband know about your role in the succession plan at Meridian? Not yet, I admitted quietly. She raised an eyebrow. That's going to be quite a shock for him. It's complicated, I said, the explanation sounding hollow even to my own ears. It always is, she replied, her tone softening. But speaking as someone who's mentored dozens of women executives, I've noticed that the most common barrier to female leadership isn't external opposition. It's allowing others to define who we are and what we're capable of. She glanced toward Oliver, now laughing with the mayor. Even when those others are the people closest to us. Her words stayed with me through dinner and the awards presentation. I watched Oliver accept the honor for Meridian's educational initiatives, smiling proudly as he described his team's vision for supporting local schools. Not once did he mention my involvement, though I had written most of the proposal he was now being celebrated for. At the reception afterward, I became increasingly invisible. When introduced to new people, Oliver would say, "This is my wife, Leanne," with no further elaboration. When conversation turned to business matters, he would subtly position himself between me and the group, physically and conversationally excluding me. The final blow came when an elderly board member, slightly drunk on complimentary champagne, approached us. "Mrs. Harrington," he said, pressing my hand between his. "Reggie speaks so highly of your understanding of Meridian's legacy. Says you've got your grandmother's head for strategy." For once, someone was acknowledging my connection to the company's history. I began to respond, but Oliver stepped forward. "Mr. Donovan, you must be thinking of another Matthews," he laughed. "Leanne's the beauty of the family, not the business brain. She can barely balance our household checkbook." The casual cruelty of the remark stunned me into silence. It wasn't just that he was diminishing me, he was actively misrepresenting me, creating a fictional version of his wife that suited his narrative. "Actually," Mr. Donovan frowned, "I distinctly recall Reggie mentioning—" "Oh, Uncle Reggie loves to tease," Oliver interrupted, wrapping his arm around my waist in a gesture that felt more possessive than affectionate. "He's always saying Leanne should have been the one working at Meridian instead of playing housewife, but we all know where her talents truly lie." He squeezed my waist. "Don't we, honey?" In that moment, looking into Oliver's expectant face, I realized he genuinely believed the fiction he had created, the Leanne he had married, educated, strategic, ambitious, had been completely replaced in his mind by the Leanne he needed, decorative, domestic, and deferential. "Yes," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "We certainly do. Later." That night, as Oliver slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and faced a difficult truth. I had allowed this erasure to happen. In the name of strategy, patience, and Uncle Reggie's succession plan, I had participated in my own diminishment until I barely recognized myself in Oliver's descriptions. I reached for my phone and sent a text to Uncle Reggie. Time to accelerate. The timeline. I'm ready. His response came seconds later. About time. Board meeting Thursday. Announcement at Friday's gala. I set down the phone and turned to look at my sleeping husband. In less than a week, Oliver would finally meet the real Leanne Matthews, the woman who had been hiding in plain sight all along. The Thursday board meeting, where my appointment as CEO would be formalized, was scheduled for 9 a.m. I told Oliver I had a charity breakfast, kissed him goodbye, and drove to Meridian headquarters, parking in the visitors section rather than the reserved executive spaces where he might recognize my car. Uncle Reggie met me in the lobby, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. Ready? To make history, Leanne. More than ready, I replied, smoothing down the lapels of my charcoal gray suit, a far cry from the feminine dresses Oliver preferred I wear. The board meeting proceeded exactly as planned. Financial reports were reviewed, quarterly projections discussed, and finally, Uncle Reggie formally announced his retirement, effective at the end of the month. As you all know, he said, looking around the table at the 10 board members, succession planning has been a priority for me over the past 5 years. I've worked closely with each of you to identify and prepare the right leader to take Meridian into its next chapter. He nodded toward me. I'm pleased to confirm our unanimous selection of Leanne Matthews Harrington as Meridian Technologies' next Chief Executive Officer. Despite having known this moment was coming, hearing it stated officially in the boardroom my grandfather had built sent a surge of emotion through me. For a brief moment, I thought of Oliver, unaware in his office 10 floors below, still believing he was on track for the C-suite himself. The rest of the meeting focused on transition details and the public announcement planned for the following evening's gala. As we wrapped up, Harold Winters, our longest-serving board member, approached me. I've served on this board through 3 CEOs, he said, his voice gruff but warm. Voted against 2 of them. But you, young lady, you've got your grandmother's insight and your uncle's strategic patience. Meridian will be in good hands. Thank you, Harold, I replied, touched by the reference to my grandmother. That means a great deal coming from you. As the board members filed out, Uncle Reggie held me back. We need to discuss how you want to handle Oliver, he said once we were alone. He's going to be blindsided tomorrow night. I know, I said, a knot forming in my stomach despite my resolve. But honestly, that's on him. He's had 6 years to actually see me, to listen when I tried to discuss business, to recognize my capabilities. Instead, he chose to create a fiction that made him comfortable. Uncle Reggie nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're right. And as CEO, you'll need to make tough personnel decisions. Think of this as your first one. The question hung unspoken between us. What role, if any, would Oliver have at Meridian after tomorrow? As his wife, I had complex feelings about this. As the new CEO, my priority had to be the company's well-being. I'll handle Oliver, I assured my uncle. No preferential treatment, but no undue punishment either. His performance will be evaluated on its merits, just like everyone else. Fair enough, Uncle Reggie said. Now, you should probably get out of here before someone tells him they've seen you in the executive conference room. I nodded and gathered my things. But as I turned to leave, Uncle Reggie called after me. Leanne. His expression was uncharacteristically serious. I'm proud of you, not just for the leader you've become, but for refusing to let anyone, even your husband, define your worth or your potential. I hugged him tightly, grateful for his guidance through this complex journey. Thank you for seeing me clearly when others couldn't or wouldn't. I slipped out through the executive entrance, successfully avoiding any encounters with Oliver or his colleagues. By noon, I was back home, changing into more casual clothes before Oliver returned for our lunch date, a monthly tradition when our schedules allowed. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Today, of all days, Oliver arrived home in high spirits, practically bouncing through the door. "Cancel whatever you've planned for dinner," he announced, grabbing me and spinning me around in our kitchen. "We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Randy called me into his office this morning," Oliver said, his face flushed with excitement. "He told me I'm being considered for a major promotion after Reggie retires. Not CEO, that's going to someone with more seniority, but possibly COO, or President of North American Operations." The irony was almost painful. On the very day I'd been formally appointed CEO, Oliver was celebrating being considered for a role that didn't even exist in our current structure. "That's wonderful," I managed, the words sticking in my throat. "Did Randy say who the new CEO will be?" Oliver waved dismissively. "Some legacy appointment, apparently. Probably one of Reggie's old cronies from the board. But that's not important. Randy made it clear that whoever it is will need strong deputies, and I'm at the top of the list." He pulled me close, kissing me on the forehead. "See? All those dinner parties and networking events paid off. I told you playing the long game would work." I nodded, unable to form words as the full weight of Oliver's delusion hit me. Not only did he have no idea I was the legacy appointment, but he genuinely believed his networking and political maneuvering had earned him consideration for an executive role, not his actual performance or capabilities. "We should pick up something special to wear for tomorrow's gala," he continued, oblivious to my silence. "It's Reggie's retirement announcement, but it's also going to be my unofficial coronation. Randy says most of the board will be there, plus all the senior leadership. I need to look the part of an executive in waiting." "I already have something picked out," I said quietly. "Nothing too flashy," he cautioned, opening the refrigerator. "You want to look elegant but appropriate. The wife of a future executive needs to project the right image." He glanced over his shoulder with that smile I'd once found charming. "Not that I need to tell you that. You've always understood your role perfectly." In that moment, watching him plan his ascension on the very day I'd secured mine, I realized we had truly reached the point of no return. Tomorrow night wouldn't just change our professional dynamics, it would irrevocably alter our marriage. Oliver wasn't just going to meet the real Leanne Matthews. He was going to confront the fiction he'd created and maintained about who I was for the past 6 years. "Yes," I agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "Tomorrow night, everyone will understand exactly what their role is." The morning of the gala, I made a decision. Before the evening's revelations, I needed to understand exactly who my husband had become at Meridian when I wasn't watching. For years, I'd heard snippets from Lorna and others about Oliver's corporate behavior, but I'd never investigated thoroughly, partly from a desire to keep our professional and personal lives separate, partly from fear of what I might find. Today, that separation would end. As the incoming CEO, I had both the right and responsibility to know. I called Lorna from my home office. "I need your help with something sensitive," I said, once I was certain Oliver had left for work. "Anything," she replied without hesitation. "Does this have to do with tonight?" "Indirectly. I want to review Oliver's personnel file and performance evaluations, and any emails or memos related to the westward expansion project he's been leading." There was a brief pause. "That's enlightening material," Lorna said carefully. "Are you sure you want to see it before your big night?" "I need to go in with my eyes open," I explained. "No more blind spots." 2 hours later, I sat in a small conference room 3 floors away from Oliver's office, a stack of folders in front of me. Lorna had arranged everything, ensuring privacy and discretion. "Take your time," she said, placing a cup of coffee beside me. "I'll make sure you're not disturbed." I started with Oliver's performance reviews, reading through 5 years of evaluations. The pattern was unmistakable. His technical financial skills were consistently rated highly, but concerns about his management style appeared repeatedly. Shows difficulty accepting input from female colleagues. Takes credit for team accomplishments. Creates an exclusionary environment. In his most recent review, Randy Stevens had written, "Oliver continues to demonstrate strong financial analysis skills, but needs significant improvement in collaborative leadership. His insistence on presenting others' ideas as his own has created resentment within his department. I've counseled him on this behavior multiple times with limited improvement." Next, I examined the Westward Expansion Project documents, Oliver's signature initiative that he frequently discussed at home, taking full credit for its conception and development. The project history told a different story. The original concept had come from Susan Kim in strategic planning. The financial modeling had been a group effort led by Paolo, not Oliver. My husband's primary contribution appeared to be consolidating others' work and presenting it to senior leadership, claiming sole authorship in the process. Most troubling were the emails. In messages to Randy and other male executives, Oliver presented himself as the driving force behind every success, while subtly undermining his colleagues, particularly women and older employees with connections to the Matthews family legacy. In one email to Paolo, he wrote, "Lorna's team delivered their segment of the presentation, predictably emotional and light on numbers. I've reworked it completely, but will let her think her contribution mattered. Matthews politics always have. To keep the diversity hires feeling included." My hands shook as I read an email chain discussing my uncle's retirement. Once the old man steps down, the real changes begin. Randy and I have already discussed my role in the new structure. The Matthews era of sentimental leadership is ending. Time for Meridian to be run like a proper business by people who understand the bottom line. The final document in the stack was a draft of a restructuring proposal Oliver had been preparing, one he had never mentioned at home. It outlined a complete reorganization that would eliminate several departments, including those led by people loyal to the Matthews family tradition of balancing profit with purpose. The proposal specifically recommended moving away from legacy commitments, like our educational initiatives and community investments, programs I had helped design and that reflected my family's values. I sat back, a cold clarity washing over me. The man I had married, the partner who had once valued my strategic mind, hadn't just diminished me personally. He was actively working to dismantle everything my family had built at Meridian, everything I had been preparing to protect and enhance as CEO. "Find what you needed?" Lorna asked, returning to the conference room as I closed the last folder. "More than I expected," I admitted. "Oliver isn't just dismissive of me. He's dismissive of everything Meridian stands for under the Matthews family. Leadership." Lorna nodded, unsurprised. "He and Paolo have been building their coalition for years, positioning themselves as the modern alternative to your family's approach. They've been quite open about their intentions to refocus the company, exclusively on profit once Reggie retires." She hesitated. "They assume the new CEO will be easily influenced or controlled." "Well," I said, gathering the folders into a neat stack, "tonight should be educational for everyone involved." I thanked Lorna for her help and left through a side entrance, avoiding any potential encounters with Oliver. As I drove home to prepare for the evening, I processed what I'd discovered. This wasn't just about my husband underestimating me anymore. This was about the soul of Meridian Technologies itself. Oliver wasn't merely planning his rise within the company my family had built. He was planning to fundamentally change it, erasing the values and commitments that had defined Meridian for 3 generations. He wasn't just trying to erase me. He was trying to erase my family's entire legacy. Tonight's revelation would be more consequential than I had initially realized. This wasn't just a personal reckoning between husband and wife, but a definitive moment for Meridian's future direction. As I parked in our driveway, I received a text from Uncle Reggie. "Everything set for tonight. No going back now." I typed my response with steady fingers. No desire to go back. Tonight we move forward, without compromise. The personal betrayal hurt, certainly, but the attempted corporate coup clarified my path forward. Tonight, I wouldn't just reclaim my identity from Oliver's diminishment. I would reclaim my family's company from those who sought to strip it of its purpose and values. I entered our house with renewed resolve, heading upstairs to prepare for what would now be both a professional debut and a personal reckoning. The black dress I had selected weeks ago hung ready in my closet. Not the supportive wife's attire Oliver had instructed me to wear, but the confident statement of a CEO about to take command. In a few hours, Oliver would finally see me clearly. Not as the housewife he had invented, but as the leader I had always been preparing to become. And based on what I had discovered today, that recognition would be just the beginning of a much larger awakening at Meridian Technologies. While preparing for the gala, I received an unexpected call from Harold Winters, the senior board member who had compared me to my grandmother. "Leanne, I apologize for disturbing you before tonight's announcement, but there's something you should know." His normally confident voice sounded troubled. "I was just in a meeting with Randy Stevens where your husband was present. Their conversation afterward was concerning." My hand tightened around the phone. "What did you hear, Harold?" They didn't realize I was still in the conference room. I was gathering my papers in the corner. Oliver was asking Randy about the CEO announcement tonight. Randy confirmed it would be a Matthews family selection, as they've been calling it. Harold paused. Then Oliver said something that struck me as odd. He said, "Once the announcement is made, we move forward with Operation Phoenix." Randy seemed to understand exactly what that meant. The name triggered an immediate connection. Phoenix was Meridian's proprietary operating platform, the core technology that powered our most profitable products. Access to its source code was strictly limited to a handful of senior engineers and executives. "Did he elaborate?" I asked, a chill spreading through me despite the warm evening. "No, but Randy mentioned something about those Swiss bank accounts finally coming in handy." Then they saw me and immediately changed the subject. Harold's voice lowered. "Leanne, in 40 years on corporate boards, I've developed an instinct for when something isn't right. Whatever Operation Phoenix is, it didn't sound like standard business procedure." I thanked Harold for the warning and immediately called Lorna, asking her to discreetly check if anyone had accessed the Phoenix source code repositories unusually in recent months. She called back 20 minutes later as I was finishing my makeup. "You were right to be suspicious," she said without preamble. "There's been a pattern of after-hours access to the Phoenix repositories from Oliver's credentials dating back 6 months. And large sections of code have been downloaded. Not normal. Review activity." "Has anything been altered?" I asked, my CEO instincts immediately focusing on potential damage. Not that I can tell from the logs, but I'm not an engineer. I've asked Susan from security to quietly run a comparison with our offline backups. She'll have results within the hour. I glanced at the clock. We needed to leave for the gala in 30 minutes. "Have her send the results directly to me and alert Uncle Reggie. No one else for now." Oliver appeared in the doorway of our bedroom as I hung up, already dressed in his tuxedo. "Who was that?" he asked casually, adjusting his cufflinks, the ones I'd given him years ago. "Charity committee," I lied smoothly. Years of practice making the deception effortless. "Last-minute details for next week's fundraiser." He nodded absently, his mind clearly elsewhere. "You look nice," he said, glancing at my black dress. "Though I thought you might wear the blue one. It's more appropriate for an executive wife." "I felt like making a statement tonight," I replied, watching his reflection in the mirror as I applied my lipstick. Oliver laughed. The only statement that matters tonight is the one Reggie makes about his replacement and my potential promotion. He checked his watch. We should get going. I want to be there early to connect with the board members before the announcement. The drive to the Westbrook Hotel passed in tense silence, Oliver rehearsing imaginary conversations under his breath, while I tried to process what I'd just learned. As we pulled up to the valet, my phone chimed with a text from Susan in security. Comparison complete. Modified code identified in billing and reporting modules. Changes would allow data rerouting to external servers. Urgent review recommended. I stared at the message, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Phoenix contained proprietary algorithms that made our products industry-leading, worth billions in intellectual property. The billing modules controlled financial transactions for our largest clients. Someone with access to both could potentially divert funds or steal technology. Oliver was planning to steal from Meridian, not just credit for others' work, but actual corporate assets and possibly client funds. And based on Harold's overheard conversation about Swiss bank accounts, he wasn't working alone. As we entered the grand ballroom, Oliver immediately spotted Randy Stevens near the bar and excused himself to say a quick hello. I watched them carefully, noting the subtle nod they exchanged, a silent confirmation of some shared understanding. Uncle Reggie approached, champagne in hand. Everything all right? You look troubled. I pulled him aside, keeping my voice low as I explained what I'd discovered. His expression darkened with each detail. Industrial espionage and embezzlement, he said finally. From our own executives. I never thought I'd see the day. Do we alert security? Call the police? I asked. Uncle Reggie considered this, his eyes tracking Oliver and Randy across the room. Not yet. If we're wrong, we create unnecessary scandal on your first day as CEO. If we're right, well, we need more evidence before making accusations against a vice president and the COO. He squeezed my hand. For now, we proceed with the announcement as planned. Tomorrow morning, we'll initiate a full security audit with outside experts. And if they try to activate whatever they've planned tonight, after the announcement, security has already quietly revoked their system access, effective immediately after I step off the stage, Uncle Reggie assured me. Susan has also isolated the Phoenix platform from any external connections as a precaution. They can try, but they won't succeed. I nodded, though the betrayal still cut deep. Not just the professional deception, I had evidence now that Oliver and his allies were actively conspiring to steal from the company my family had built, possibly draining client accounts in the process. This wasn't office politics. It was criminal activity. Across the room, Oliver caught my eye and gestured for me to join him. His smile was confident, completely untroubled by guilt or doubt. He truly believed tonight was his stepping stone to greater power within Meridian, power he planned to abuse, in the most fundamental way possible. As I made my way toward my husband, stopping to greet board members and executives along the way, I felt an odd sense of calm replace my earlier shock and anger. The discovery of Oliver's planned betrayal had removed any lingering doubt or hesitation about what needed to happen next. The man who had systematically diminished me, who had dismissed me as just a housewife, wasn't just undermining his wife. He was attempting to defraud the company I was about to lead. There would be no compromise, no gentle transition, no saving of his pride or our marriage. Oliver's expression brightened as I approached, mistaking my resolute expression for supportive excitement. He pulled me close, whispering in my ear, "Everything's falling into place. Randy says the announcement will solidify our position perfectly." I smiled back, letting him see exactly what he expected to see, the dutiful wife, playing her assigned role. "Tonight will certainly change everything," I agreed, thinking not of his imagined promotion, but of the evidence accumulating in Susan's secure server. Perhaps more than you can imagine. The betrayal was now complete, documented, and undeniable, All that remained was the reckoning that would begin in exactly 27 minutes when Uncle Reggie stepped up to the microphone and changed both our lives forever. As the gala progressed, Uncle Reggie worked the room while I maintained my position near Oliver, watching him closely. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, messages he checked with increasing frequency, each glance followed by a subtle nod to Paolo across the ballroom. "Business on a Friday night?" I asked lightly when he checked it for the 5th time in 10 minutes. "Just confirming some details for next week," he replied, sliding the phone back into his jacket. "Nothing for you to worry about." The dismissal was so routine, so expected, that I almost smiled at its predictability. Tonight would be the last time Oliver Harrington would tell me not to worry my pretty little head about business matters. When he excused himself to use the restroom, I seized the opportunity. The moment he was out of sight, I approached Paolo, who was conversing with 2 engineers near the bar. "Paolo," I greeted him warmly. "I don't think we've had a chance to talk since the Matthews family reunion last summer." He looked momentarily. Thrown by my direct approach, Oliver had kept us carefully separated at company events for years. "Mrs. Harrington," he recovered smoothly. "Lovely to see you again. Oliver mentioned you've been busy with your charity work." "Among other things," I agreed. "Actually, I've been meaning to ask you about that consulting firm Oliver mentioned. The one in Zurich handling some of our international accounts? I believe he called it Helios Partners?" Paolo's expression flickered momentarily before settling back into practiced neutrality. "I'm afraid I don't recall any such firm. Perhaps you misheard?" "Perhaps," I conceded with a smile. "Though it's odd. I'm usually quite good with details, especially when I hear them repeatedly in late-night phone conversations coming from my home office." Paolo shifted uncomfortably. "If you'll excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with." He retreated. I turned to find Lorna at my elbow, having witnessed the exchange. "Helios Partners?" she asked under her breath. "A guess based on Greek mythology," I explained. "Phoenix, Helios, both sun-related." I wanted to see his reaction, and it was informative. "I just received an update from Susan," Lorna murmured. She found evidence of shell companies in Paolo's work emails, companies acting as consultants on the westward expansion project, billing substantial hours but delivering nothing documentable. "Let me guess," I said. "One of them is registered." "In Zurich." 2, actually, plus accounts in Singapore and the Cayman Islands." She glanced toward where Oliver was now returning from the restroom. "The web is wider than we thought. Oliver's betrayal wasn't just professional. It was comprehensive. A network of shell companies, falsified consultancies, and financial manipulations spanning years and involving multiple executives. While playing the devoted husband at home, he had been systematically constructing an elaborate scheme to defraud Meridian of both intellectual property and millions in diverted funds. The most painful realization wasn't the depth of his deception, but its careful calculation. Oliver hadn't diminished me out of casual sexism or inherited patriarchal attitudes. He had deliberately relegated me to just a housewife to ensure I wouldn't look too closely at his professional activities. My erasure had been strategic, a necessary component of his larger plan. As Uncle Reggie approached the podium and the room quieted, Oliver returned to my side, slipping his arm around my waist possessively. "This is it," he whispered excitedly. "The start of Meridian's new chapter." Despite everything, I couldn't help but agree with him on that one point. Tonight indeed marked the beginning of Meridian's new chapter, just not the one he had planned. While waiting for Uncle Reggie to begin his speech, I scanned the room, mentally categorizing the key players who would be essential in the aftermath of tonight's revelation. Lorna caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Our prearranged signal that everything was in place. Over the past 3 weeks, as the CEO announcement approached, I had quietly built a network of allies throughout Meridian, people who would help stabilize the company during the transition and address the corruption Oliver and his cohorts had embedded in our systems. Susan from security had assembled a forensic team ready to move the moment I gave the order. They would secure servers, isolate compromised systems, and document every unauthorized modification to our code. Harold Winters had engaged an independent auditing firm specializing in corporate fraud. They would arrive at Meridian's offices first thing Monday morning to begin tracing the financial irregularities Lorna had discovered. Dr. Whitmore from the business school had recommended a crisis management team who now waited on standby, prepared to help manage both internal communications and public relations, as news of the attempted fraud inevitably leaked. Most importantly, I had met privately with 5 key department heads who had been marginalized under Randy's leadership, talented executives who had remained loyal to Meridian despite being sidelined by Oliver and Paolo's boys' club. Each had received a confidential briefing about my imminent appointment and had committed to supporting the company through the coming transition. These preparations had been meticulous and strategic, conducted with the stealth Oliver had unwittingly taught me through years of watching him maneuver for advantage. The difference was that my alliances weren't formed to enrich myself at the company's expense, but to protect Meridian's legacy and future. Uncle Reggie stepped up to the microphone, tapping it gently to call the room to attention. Conversations quieted as glasses were raised in anticipation of his remarks. "Good evening, friends and colleagues," he began, his voice steady and warm. "For 50 years, Meridian Technologies has been my home and my purpose. From the small repair shop my parents started to the global technology leader we are today, this company has always been guided by a commitment to innovation with integrity." Oliver squeezed my waist, misinterpreting my tension as excitement for his expected promotion. "Almost time," he whispered. I noticed Randy Stevens shifting nervously near the stage, his eyes darting between Uncle Reggie and the exit. Perhaps he sensed that something wasn't proceeding according to plan. "As many of you know," Uncle Reggie continued, "succession planning has been a priority for me over the past 5 years. The Matthews family has always believed that Meridian's leadership should combine technical expertise with a deep understanding of our company's values and culture." Paolo appeared at Oliver's side, leaning in to whisper something I couldn't hear. Oliver frowned slightly, then shook his head dismissively, his confidence unshaken. "Tonight," Uncle Reggie said, his gaze sweeping across the room, "I am pleased to announce that after unanimous board approval, Meridian Technologies will be led by someone who embodies both our innovative spirit and our commitment to integrity. Someone who has been preparing for this role through years of quiet dedication and strategic vision." Oliver straightened his posture, adjusting his tie as though preparing to be called forward. The complete lack of doubt in his expression, even after years of deception and fraud, was almost impressive in its delusion. "Ladies and gentlemen," Uncle Reggie smiled, his eyes finding mine across the room, "it is my honor to introduce Meridian Technologies' next Chief Executive Officer, my niece, Leanne Matthews Harrington." The moment had arrived. I stepped away from Oliver's suddenly slack grip, moving toward the stage as a spotlight found me in the crowd. The walk to the stage seemed to last both an instant and an eternity. I was acutely aware of Oliver's stunned expression behind me, of Paolo's widening eyes, of Randy Stevens gripping the edge of a nearby table for support. But I had prepared too thoroughly to be distracted by their shock. As I climbed the 3 steps to join Uncle Reggie at the podium, my mind cycled through the comprehensive preparations that had brought me to this moment, preparations that went far beyond simply building alliances. For the past month, I had immersed myself in every aspect of Meridian's operations, working from a temporary office in a separate building, while Oliver believed I was coordinating charity events. I had reviewed every major contract, analyzed quarterly projections, and personally met with our 10 largest clients to ensure continuity during the leadership transition. The leather portfolio I'd carried into the gala, which Oliver had assumed, contained nothing more important than touch-up makeup, held detailed briefing documents on immediate actions to be taken after tonight's announcement. Each document was color-coded and prioritized. Red tabs marked urgent security measures, changing access codes to our most sensitive systems, securing physical access to server rooms, and implementing the emergency protocol Susan had developed to protect our intellectual property from theft. Blue tabs covered financial containment, freezing suspicious accounts, halting unusual transactions, and initiating an immediate review of all projects Oliver and Paolo had overseen, particularly those with international components. Green tabs outlined personnel actions, temporary reassignments for key roles, communication strategies for employees, and detailed documentation of the evidence against Oliver, Paolo, and Randy to support potential termination for cause. Yellow tabs contained media and client communication plans, prepared statements, talking points for account managers, and reassurance strategies for stakeholders who might be concerned about the leadership change. As Uncle Reggie embraced me at the podium, passing the symbolic leadership of Meridian with a warm handshake caught by the event photographer, I knew that within hours, these carefully orchestrated preparations would be activated. By midnight, the security team would be securing digital assets. By dawn, the financial team would be tracing potentially fraudulent transactions. By Monday morning, the company would be operating under new leadership with protective measures fully implemented. "Thank you, Uncle Reggie," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and clear. "And thank you to the board of directors for your confidence and support." I turned to face the assembled crowd, noting the varied expressions: surprise from most employees, satisfaction from the board members who had approved my appointment, and stunned disbelief from Oliver and his inner circle. For those who don't know me beyond my appearances at company events, I'm Leanne Matthews Harrington. I've spent the past 15 years preparing for this role, learning every aspect of Meridian's operations, and developing a vision for our future that honors our legacy while embracing innovation. I allowed my gaze to move deliberately across the room, briefly meeting Oliver's eyes. His face had drained of color, his normal confidence replaced by something approaching panic as the implications of my appointment registered. "Some of you may know me primarily as Oliver Harrington's wife," I continued, my tone conversational but firm. "Others may have worked with me through various initiatives without realizing my connection to the Matthews family. Tonight marks the end of that separation between my personal and professional identities." The room had gone completely silent, every person frozen in place as they processed this revelation. I couldn't help but notice Paolo frantically texting, under the table, likely attempting to warn Confederates or activate contingency plans that Susan's team had already neutralized. "As we celebrate Meridian's 50th anniversary," I said, "we also begin a new chapter. One that will combine our historical commitment to ethical business practices with cutting-edge innovation and transparent leadership." I smiled, feeling the weight of years of preparation crystallize into this singular moment of transformation. And I assure you, I've been methodically preparing for this transition for longer than some might imagine. As I concluded my initial remarks, I made the first calculated move in the confrontation that had been years in the making. Rather than returning to Oliver's side as would be expected of a supportive spouse, I gestured toward Lorna Murray. "I'd like to invite Lorna Murray to join me on stage," I announced. "Effective immediately, Lorna will be serving as Meridian's Chief Operating Officer, overseeing our daily operations and reporting directly to me." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Everyone in the room understood the significance. The COO position had been Randy Stevens for the past 8 years, and conventional wisdom held that Oliver was next in line for that role. Lorna ascended the steps with dignified confidence, accepting my handshake with a professional smile that belied the magnitude of the moment. As the company's most senior female executive and someone who had been repeatedly sidelined by Oliver and Randy's boys' club, her elevation sent an unmistakable message about the direction of my leadership. Thank you, Leanne, Lorna said into the microphone. I look forward to working alongside you to strengthen Meridian's position as an industry leader and an exemplar of responsible corporate governance. Her emphasis on responsible governance was subtle but deliberate, the first public indication that the previous leadership had fallen short of that standard. I returned to the microphone. Additionally, I'm pleased to announce that effective Monday morning, Harold Winters will be stepping in as interim chief financial officer while we conduct a comprehensive review of our financial systems and practices. Harold nodded from his position near the front of the room, his expression serious. The message was unmistakable. Not only was Randy being replaced as COO, but Oliver would not be ascending to CFO as he had clearly anticipated. The strategic nature of these appointments wasn't lost on anyone in the room. I had just removed Oliver and Randy from Meridian's chain of command without directly mentioning either of them. More importantly, I had placed trusted allies in the exact positions needed to investigate and contain the financial irregularities we had discovered. I watched Randy Stevens slowly back away from his position near the stage, making a beeline for the exit. Before he could reach it, 2 members of Meridian's security team, briefed earlier that day by Susan, casually positioned themselves near the doors. They didn't stop him, but their presence was enough to make him reconsider his hasty departure. Oliver remained frozen in place, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and calculation. I could almost see him reassessing the situation, trying to determine how much I knew and what options remained available to him. Paolo had disappeared from his previous position, a concerning development, but not unexpected. Susan's team would be monitoring all system access attempts, and his credentials had already been quietly restricted. As we move forward, I continued, Meridian will undergo some structural changes to ensure we remain at the forefront of both technological innovation and corporate integrity. Some of these changes may be challenging, but all will be guided by our core values of transparency, accountability, and ethical leadership. The subtext was clear to those who needed to hear it. The era of backdoor deals, misappropriated credit, and financial manipulation was over. I met Oliver's gaze directly across the crowded room. Transparency and accountability begin at the top, which is why my first act as CEO will be to commission an independent audit of all executive decisions and financial transactions from the past 3 years. It was a precision strike, not overtly accusatory, but specifically targeting the period during which Oliver, Paolo, and Randy had been developing their scheme. Oliver's face paled as he finally began to understand that this wasn't just an unexpected promotion for his wife. It was an existential threat to the elaborate fraud he had constructed. After concluding my formal remarks, I stepped down from the stage into a sea of congratulations and questions. Board members, executives, and longtime employees surrounded me, each eager to establish their connection to the new CEO. Through the crowd, I could see Oliver standing alone, his usual network of allies having dispersed in the face of the unexpected power shift. I deliberately worked my way through the room, accepting congratulations and having brief conversations with key stakeholders. This wasn't just courtesy, it was strategic positioning, ensuring that Oliver couldn't leave without creating a scene, and that when we finally spoke, it would be on my terms. After 20 minutes of calculated circulation, I finally approached my husband. The crowd around us subtly withdrew, sensing the tension and giving us a small pocket of privacy in the crowded ballroom. Quite the surprise, Oliver said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Were you ever going to tell me? Were you ever going to tell me about Operation Phoenix? I countered quietly. Or Helios Partners, or the modified code in our billing modules. The blood drained from his face. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence, Oliver. Not anymore. I maintained a pleasant expression for anyone observing us. We have the server logs, the code modifications, and the financial trails. Susan has been tracking your after-hours access for months. Susan? Confusion flickered across his face. The secretary? Susan Chen, our head of cybersecurity, I corrected. Another capable professional you've consistently underestimated. Oliver glanced around, assessing escape routes and potential allies. Finding neither, he switched tactics. Whatever you think you've found, I can explain. There are legitimate business reasons for everything I've done. Save it for the forensic auditors, I said calmly. They'll be at the office first thing Monday morning. You can't do this, he hissed, dropping all pretense of composure. I've spent years building my position at Meridian. You can't just walk in and destroy everything. I'm not destroying anything, Oliver. I'm protecting the company, my family, built from the people attempting to steal from it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Did you really think no one would notice millions in consulting fees to shell companies? Or unauthorized modifications to our proprietary code? He flinched, then tried one last angle. Leanne, be reasonable. We're married. Whatever you think I've done, we can work through this together. As a couple. The appeal to our marriage, relationship he'd systematically hollowed out through years of dismissal and deception, was the final confirmation of his moral bankruptcy. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to steal from my family's company, I replied. Though perhaps it ended much earlier, when you decided I was nothing more than a convenient accessory to your ambitions. That's not fair, he protested, though without conviction. Neither was dismissing me as just a housewife for 6 years. While using our marriage as cover for corporate espionage, I countered. But fairness isn't my concern anymore. Corporate security and fiduciary responsibility are. I gestured subtly, and Susan appeared at my side. Mr. Harrington's access credentials have been suspended, she informed me, professional and calm, and the system modifications have been isolated and documented. Thank you, Susan, I replied. Please have security escort Mr. Harrington from the building. He's feeling unwell and needs to leave early. Oliver's face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, Oliver. You did this to yourself when you decided to betray both your marriage vows and your professional ethics. I stepped back, creating distance between us. Security will accompany you home to collect essential personal items. The rest can be arranged through my attorney. As 2 security officers approached, Oliver made one final, desperate appeal. Leanne, think about what you're doing. I'm your husband. I met his gaze directly, finally free of the pretense I'd maintained for years. No, Oliver. You're a soon-to-be former employee with serious allegations of financial misconduct against you. And as of tonight, I'm your boss. As security escorted Oliver toward the exit, a strange hush fell over the nearby guests who had witnessed our confrontation. The moment hung suspended between scandal and corporate drama, with dozens of eyes watching to see how I would handle this pivotal moment. I had imagined this scene countless times over the years. The revelation, the confrontation, the aftermath. In my imagination, it had always been charged with righteous anger and vindication. The reality was different, cleaner, calmer, more resolute. With deliberate composure, I turned to face the room, making no attempt to hide what had just occurred. This wasn't a moment for embarrassment or apology, but for clear leadership in a time of transition. As some of you may have gathered, I addressed the curious onlookers, my voice steady. Meridian is facing some internal challenges that require immediate attention. I want to assure everyone that these challenges will be addressed transparently and decisively. From across the room, Uncle Reggie caught my eye and gave a subtle nod of approval. Beside him, Harold Winters raised his glass in a silent toast to the changing of the guard. Meridian Technologies was founded on principles of innovation and integrity, I continued. Those principles haven't changed, even if some individuals have lost sight of them. The room had grown quiet, with even distant conversations tapering off as people realized something significant was happening. I stood straighter, feeling the weight of my family's legacy and my own long preparation culminate in this moment. 4. Those who have maintained those principles, who have contributed their talents while sometimes being overlooked or undervalued, I want you to know, I see you. Your contributions are recognized, and your voices will be heard. Lorna stepped forward to stand beside me, a visual representation of the new leadership taking shape. Around the room, I could see other allies: Susan, the department heads I'd been secretly meeting with, employees who had been marginalized. Under the old regime, straightening their postures, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to cautious hope. Just a housewife, Oliver had called me mere hours ago, dismissing years of education, preparation, and strategic patience. Now, as he disappeared through the exit doors with security at his sides, I claimed the identity I had been building all along: CEO, leader, heir to a legacy of ethical innovation. I raised my glass, and the room followed suit, a forest of crystal, catching the light. To Meridian's next chapter, built on the best of our past, while courageously facing our future. As the crowd echoed my toast, I felt something shift finally and completely. The culmination of years of being diminished, dismissed and underestimated. The satisfying symmetry of this moment wasn't lost on me. The man who had systematically tried to erase me had instead erased himself from the company's future through his own actions. The triumph wasn't in revenge or retribution, but in restoration of my identity, of Meridian's values, and of the legacy my grandmother had helped build but never fully claimed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.